Today, we are breaking down the Washington Commanders 2025 NFL Draft Class. I am joined here by my guy, Louie Tee. Louie, say hi to the people, and then we'll jump right into the first pick.
How's everybody doing? My name is Louie Tee, host of the Louie Tee Network. So glad to be on the program back for the second time. It's been a while, but we are going to pick right up where we left off, man. Can't wait to talk to you about this Commanders draft.
It's so exciting. Yeah, literally, we ended up talking 3 years ago and then have come full circle from talking about like Matt Corral and stuff to
Yeah.
being able to talk about Jaden Daniels, Josh Connerly, and all that.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to have that full pivot. But the first round, this was an intriguing one. A lot of us were talking before the Laramie Tunsil trade
Mhm.
about tackle being a very key position to
Mhm.
study. Were you in Mobile, by the way?
I was not. I was
Okay,
not.
so I was about to say, like, I ended up seeing this in person. Obviously, the clips were all surfacing around.
Mhm.
Josh Connerly had a roller coaster, but eventually really solid because I think got voted offensive lineman of the
That's right.
week for Mobile,
Mhm.
and it was highlighted by some really good reps, low lighted by the one rep where Mike
Mike
Green got
Green.
on.
Yeah.
And then it was a right tackle rep, so it's like I wasn't overly concerned, but I mean, this was a guy going into Mobile who was a top 15 prospect to most people, including myself, and then maybe slid a little bit, but um, what was your thought process on the fact that you guys stayed right there with the limited draft capital, but on top of that, ended up going after an offensive tackle of all things after trading for Laramie Tunsil?
So you just mentioned that was a right tackle rep. That's more likely than not where he's going to play. There's still a chance he could be kicked inside the guard if they don't feel like he's ready for tackle. But the prevailing thought is he'll be ready to go at tackle week one. So that'll be where he starts off his NFL career. And the whole premise of the offseason was maximizing Jaden Daniels. We found a superstar last year, and now they wanted to take all the resources around him and make them stronger. They know what they have at the quarterback position. And so getting Debo Samuel, getting Laramie Tunsil, and then fortifying that offensive line with bookend tackles by getting Josh Connolly was the goal that they aimed to achieve, and they feel like they've done that. I had no issues with the selection. Most fans were stuck on edge rusher at that
Right.
point. So it was either one of two options in most fans' minds: edge rusher or trade out of the pick altogether, because we only had 5 selections. And they had already set their board, which is what had gotten us in trouble in past years with the
Mhm.
last regime. We've had 4 straight first round picks prior to this one that are no longer on the roster, right? I mean, you can't live like that in this league and be successful. And part of the issue was they would always take players at a position of need, no matter where that player was on their board.
Right.
And that'll get you into trouble every single time. And so the beauty of what they did was they stayed true to their board. There were 2 players that they felt like if they were there at 28, they were going to stay. And Josh Connolly Jr. was one of those 2 players.
Mm.
So they stuck there, they picked, and they got a guy that's going to upgrade one of the most impactful positional groups on the entire field in front of the biggest asset that this organization probably has ever had in its existence.
Mm.
So from that perspective, you got to love what the Commanders did in getting Josh Connolly. And if he can be the equivalent to Laramie Tunsil on the left side, that would put Washington as one of the better offensive lines, at least from a pass protecting standpoint, in
Right.
the entire National Football League. And we've already seen what Jaden Daniels can do when he is protected.
Absolutely. Very well said. It's something I also want to bring up about Josh Connerly, the last quarterback he ended up protecting. First off, he wasn't even the blind side for Dylan Gabriel, but Dylan Gabriel had the same type of movement skills that you're kind of trying to utilize with Jaden Daniels, the big play ability as well. So he's not used to basically a stationary quarterback. He is comfortable with the idea of having a moving pocket and having a more mobile system. So it does make a lot of sense. I do wonder again, is that right tackle rep going to be indicative of what could happen? Maybe he just needs a little bit more growth there. Fingers crossed that's not the case, but Josh Conley still was a top 15 player for me on draft day. So I love the age. I love the idea of developing the offensive line, and you can never go wrong with trying to upgrade your offensive line. You can reach, you can miss, but you can't go wrong, in my opinion, because it's always a position you need to upgrade, especially with Jaden Daniels not being necessarily the most well built guy, having some injuries in the past. And then also, I mean, being yeeted versus Florida State just a little bit over a year and a half ago. So, second round, I'm going to be honest. I think this might have been the biggest steal in the draft. And that's a ballsy ass claim. I know it's
Mm,
stupid, but Trey Amos, because not only did he fill a position of need for you guys,
mm,
but most importantly, I'm almost convinced the Philadelphia Eagles were eyeballing the hell out of him 3 picks later.
mm.
I was damn near certain of it. They brought him in for a top 30. They need a boundary corner who's physical. He matches Quinion Mitchell. So on top of the fact that he helps you all out, he's a good player, super high floor. He also got to be taken away from upgrading a Super Bowl roster. What were your thoughts on Amos?
I thought he was in consideration at 29.
Right.
So to
Yeah.
get him at 61 overall was ridiculous
Right.
value. He was my 5th corner in the draft. I think he was taken as the 6th corner
Mm.
in the draft. So I mean, he went like kind of in the order that I thought he would fall somewhere in that neighborhood, but never in my wildest dreams did I think we would be able to get him at 61. So when he was still on the board, it felt like a perfect match.
Mhm.
And I was shocked that we could get that type of value. And again, it was just kind of a similar position that we were in because as fans, we said, and I know I was very adamant about this, if you're going to trade and try to get back real value in a draft that we felt like rounds 2 through 4 is probably where your best value was going to be anyway,
Mhm.
this was the last opportunity to do that and get real value. Like you're not getting real value out of a 3rd or a 4th round trade back. But trading back out of the 2nd round, trading back out of the 1st round, that's where you're going to get your real value.
Right.
And this was the last opportunity to do that. So we were really interested to see, was there a player there worth sticking and picking? And obviously this was a no doubter for us. Or was the trade back the better option?
Right.
And sure enough, Trey Amos was there. They made the selection. It's like you said, a position of need for us desperately. I mean, if you look at a lot of our defensive breakdowns last year, a lot of them came because of poor cornerback play. And we struggled out there mightily. Hence the trade for Marshawn Lattimore in season. He wasn't healthy last year, so we're hoping he's 100% healthy this offseason. And then, we had Mikey Sanders still, who we drafted to be a nickel, who
Mhm.
was excellent for us last year as a boundary, but he's undersized. He doesn't have the type of speed you're looking for out there. And he fought like hell. But ultimately, his home in this league is in the nickel where he belongs. So now you get the length, you get the size outside on both sides now with Marshawn Lattimore on one side, Trey Amos on the other side. You get to kick. And I feel like both draft picks, 1st and 2nd round, what they did effectively was they took guys and they put them in their proper slots, right?
Mm.
So they took draft picks from last year who did yeoman-like work for us, maybe out of position. Brandon Coleman last year drafted as a 3rd round pick out of TCU, started at left tackle for us for half the season, right?
Mhm.
And was platooning in and out with Cornelius Lucas the first half of the season at left tackle, and then ultimately took over the spot and stayed there the rest of the year. He was solid, but he's a guard. And
Mhm.
ultimately, they drafted him to be a starter on this offensive line somewhere. They tried him at left tackle to hope that they could unearth a gem there because he's got the athletic profile, but he's a guard. And so he fought like hell, but ultimately, he's going to probably get kicked inside to left guard if everything works out with Josh Connolly. And same thing here with Trey Amos. If he works out the way that we intend him to, that allows us to kick Mikey Sanders still inside to his proper, more natural spot of nickel corner. And so it really, you're in both instances, you're making 2 positions stronger with 1 addition. And I mean, you can't really do much better than that if you're a Commanders fan. I mean, yes, you would love to have upgraded the edge rushing position, but corner and then, people in the analytics world, there's an argument, a chicken or the egg argument about which is more important, the corner or the edge. The analytics people will tell you it's the corner, right?
Mhm.
Because you can take away an edge. You can't take a corner out of the game, and a corner can take away the other team's best receiver if he's that good. Whereas with an edge, you can double him, you can chip him, you can triple team if need be. There's ways to take that guy out of the game. You can't take a number 1 corner out of the game. So whether
Absolutely.
you're on that side of the argument or not, I just know we needed an upgrade at corner. And this was a guy that I did not anticipate us getting with a 2nd round pick. And really, the corner position got really sparse after the 2nd round.
Right.
So if you didn't take one, because we didn't have a 3rd round pick. So if you didn't take one in the 2nd round, you probably weren't going to get one that was going to be able to step in right away and help you. we got a really good corner, and we're really excited about what he can mean and do for this defense.
Absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth. You pretty much got 2 picks for the price of 1 by being able to put your high value picks from a year before at the positions you actually intended for them to play rather than out of pure necessity. It's always good to play guys where they're actually
Yep,
best rather than kind of forcing them
yep,
to do what you have to do. I mean, I guess technically Josh Connerly will eventually play a position where, it's maybe not fully best for him as a left tackle, but at 28, I think that's worth the value. I think you'll agree with that.
mm-hmm,
Also, with Trey Amos, he's big and he's physical
mm-hmm,
too. He doesn't necessarily have that 210-pound frame that you
right,
might be dreaming of versus AJ Brown, but he's still in the 190s and
right,
he's still extremely physical. And I
yep,
love him at the catch point. So
yep,
I think, especially in a very physical division versus very physical wide receivers, you need to have somebody like that who's more reliably healthy, which obviously you highlighted. Marshawn Lattimore's a little bit of a tenured injury history there.
yep,
We jumped through the third round, though, end up getting to the fourth. Jalen Lane,
mm-hmm,
and ended up acquiring through a fifth round pick Debo Samuel.
mm-hmm.
That's fine. I mean, I think you'll agree it's like kind of a short term thing, just making sure
Absolutely,
you
so
got
right on.
some, yeah, you got some bodies on the roster.
Mm-hmm,
Jalen Lane's going to bring some excitement, some explosiveness, some big play ability down the field that maybe right now is not necessarily there in terms of the younger department. I really thought that it was probably the biggest reach, but it was
mm-hmm,
still very good value. So that's why I don't have a least favorite pick of the draft. I think everything was pretty damn spot on. But for you, do you have any ideas on in terms of what the early role will be for
mm-hmm.
Jalen Lane? Is he going to be the deep, like going to be more of a deep threat? Or is this going to be somebody who needs to have a more developmental role?
So the only reason initially why we, I first of all, I love the pick when
Mhm.
it was made because I've been screaming for a punt returner
Mm.
since 2022. We, for some inexplicable reason, let DeAndre Carter walk away when he was the best punt returner we had had probably since Brandon Banks, right? It'd been eons since we had, it may be Jamison Crowder. Let me give some respect to Jamison Crowder. Early Jamison Crowder was really good as a punt returner. We hadn't had a punt returner in at least 5 or 6 years, 7 years going on. And then DeAndre Carter shows up, gives us life, gives us a spark there, and they just let him walk for peanuts. And we didn't never really replace that guy. We put guys that had no juice, no real threat back there, just more safety, like he's gonna catch the ball.
Mm.
And so you really were taking a portion of the game away from us in terms of could we score, could we impact the game on special teams from a return standpoint, because the kickoff had already been pretty much eliminated at that point, and punt return was the only way you could really impact field position or make a big play, and we didn't have that either because we didn't have anybody dynamic back there. So getting a punt returner in the fourth round was music to my ears. And I knew they were going to get a punt returner because of the guys they were talking to prior to the draft, the top 30 visits, the guys they were working out privately. It all screamed, we're getting us a punt returner this year.
Mm.
So when they drafted Lane in the fourth round, I knew exactly what the pick was for. And then hearing the phone call when they made it to Jalen Lane, telling him, you're going to help us on special teams, that's his role immediately. Is he's
Okay.
going to come in here and he's going to return punts. He's going to return kickoffs more likely than not. Even if it's not kickoffs, he's going to return punts for sure. That's going to give us a dynamic return man. And then I think this is a perfect situation for him to learn from Debo Samuel, who is a guy who you watch Jalen Lane at Virginia Tech. It was poor quarterback play. So a lot of times they got him the football in a multitude of ways, jet sweeps,
Mhm.
um, you know, um, threw wide receiver screens to him and
Right.
got him the football underneath, and reverses, double reverses, all kinds of things they did with him. He's a vertical threat. You go back and watch him when he was at Middle Tennessee State. You could see him getting vertical. A lot of times when they would run him vertical in the Virginia Tech offense, it would be across the field, like deep over routes and
Mhm.
things of that nature. It wasn't just straight vertical. They think he can unlock a straight vertical threat opposite of Terry McLaurin. We really don't have another guy. De'Ami Brown was that guy for us last year. He's no longer here. He went to Jacksonville. So they need someone to come in here and offer them the ability to stretch the football field opposite of Terry McLaurin. So this is a guy that can do that as well. But he just adds a different dimension because you could get it in his hands. One of the things we lacked last season, which is why the Debo Samuel edition and now the Jalen Lane editions make so much sense, is we didn't have anybody that could create with the ball in their hands.
Mm.
Jaden Daniels had to be surgical. He had to, pick apart defenses with his arm. And there were a lot of 12 and 13 and 14 play drives because we didn't have dynamic playmakers. guys that could make a guy miss, take a 5-yard gain, turn it into a 15-yard gain, take a 7-yard gain, turn it into a 27-yard gain. So now you get Deebo Samuel, a guy who is built for a Cliff Kingsbury offense where we're going to get it to him quickly. He can break a tackle. He can make someone miss and turn a short gain into a bigger one. And same thing can be said for Jalen Lane. These are integral parts of what we're looking to do and upgrade. The offensive line was big. The defense, the run defense was big, and being more explosive and dynamic offensively. And Jalen Lane offers you the ability to do that. So the only guy that I thought was better than him, and he doesn't offer you the special teams value, which is why they weren't really interested, was Jalen Royals. I thought at that point of the draft, he was still available. I was shocked that he was still available. I thought he was a really good receiver.
Right.
And he had still yet to be picked. So that was the guy you were looking at and saying, but at the same time, I understood the pick, and I love it because I wanted a punt returner for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, you just added even more context than I could have given. And adding the third phase of the game is something that even people like myself don't actually appreciate enough. And it does matter if you don't have, like, not many teams you really think about how in depth their return game is. And I mean, as someone who I used to love the Bears, especially growing up, it's like watching Devin Hester take it to the house. There is legitimate value in that. And that's how you can turn the tide of a game with just one play, the way that maybe offenses don't always have the ability to. So I definitely can see that. That does certainly make my opinion even higher on the pick than it already was. But the next pick, Kane Medrano. He's a very intriguing linebacker. Going to probably be some nickel reps as well. I know that I believe the linebacker coach from UCLA is now on the Washington Commanders team, or at least somebody who's coaching Kane Medrano in the past. I ended up hearing a little bit about it from Steve Mensch. So I love the idea that there's already familiarity with him. I hear he's a high character guy, great athlete, needs to add some meat on his bones, but we're talking about maybe another special teamer that is going to end up having a potential future in that linebacking / nickel room.
Yep. That's, you hit it right on the head. When you draft a guy like Kane Medrano, you get to the later rounds, specifically 6th and 7th round, height, weight, speed. You're looking for guys that have traits, right? You're not necessarily looking for a need, because I mean, how many 6th and 7th round picks actually work out and end up being big time players for you? Not often. You can find gems late in the draft, but it's rare. You're looking for traits at that point, moldable traits. And this is a guy, height, weight, speed. He's a tremendous athlete, was the most athletic linebacker at the combine, ran the fastest 40 at the combine. To your point, Ken Norton Jr. is our linebackers coach, was with him in UCLA. So there is familiarity there. Medrano has a background as a offensive player, wide receiver, made the switch over to linebacker. So he, is a little raw, and he's continuing to get better at the position. One of the big knocks on him is his tackling, right? He had a really, really bad missed tackle rate, right? It was really high. But the athletic profile of what you're looking for, he's a smart football player. He's a guy that, like you said, nickel, dime, maybe even at the NFL level, because he's so good in coverage, really athletically gifted and fluid out in space. He has the body of a safety. I don't know if he's going to be able to put more on that frame. It doesn't feel like he's going to get too much bigger than his 222-pound frame. He may get to 225. He may get to 227. I can't see him being 235 or anything like that, but we'll see. Doesn't look like his frame can stand to put more on it. But when it's all said and done, his frame, and Dan Quinn loves athletic, undersized linebackers. He loves that speed down in the box. When he was in Dallas, he used a guy named Marquise Bell, who's 205 pounds, as a safety, as a box linebacker, a nickel backer. So he'll get creative with some of those pieces and parts. We'll see what they decide to do. Medrano feels more of a coverage guy that they'll try to use as a chess piece there down the road. For now, he's going to cut his teeth as a special teams player, and that's how he's going to make his hay. And if he can continue to be successful there, that's going to give him opportunities to maybe get onto the field and carve out a role for himself in a niche as a nickel or even a dime backer in the defense. So that was one of the picks where you go, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Like it really didn't. We didn't need linebacker. If you would have asked me before the draft, give me 3 positions that we weren't drafting, linebacker would have been one of them. Like, we weren't going to draft linebacker. I just didn't see that happening. So this was truly one of those, hey, height, weight, speed. This guy has a ton of traits that we love. Let's draft this kid, see if we can develop him, find a niche for him, and we'll figure all of that stuff out later. But let's just get an athlete and see what we can do with him.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not a huge fan of when my coaching staff does something like that. When you see some other players that you feel would be better in terms of those traits for the vision of your team, for potentially impacting the actual needs of the roster. But like you said, and I think this will make, I think we both agree on this, having that Ken Norton Jr. background makes you feel so much better about it because they already know who Kane is coming in. It's not like, okay, we see this linebacker who we brought in for a meeting and we had a 30-minute sit down with him.
Right.
No, this is somebody who Ken Norton Jr. has had extensive time being able to learn, grow, and develop. And he said, I want to continue growing and developing this guy. I see a bright future for him. So I
Mhm.
think you'll agree with that. That's obviously something that was, a huge win, in my opinion, for that particular type of pick.
Yep.
But last but not least, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt.
Yep.
This guy, I mean, there was a whole big shenanigan in terms of eligibility, which is why he only
Mhm.
played one game this past year versus
Yep.
New Mexico. And he did well, right? I
Mhm.
think it was like 9 carries, over 100 yards, like multiple touchdowns. But the thing is, NCAA said you can play an extra year. Then there was a whole debacle. Ended up not being able to play for the rest of the year. Then he
Mhm.
goes to the Shrine Bowl and absolutely kicks some ass.
Yep.
Surprising to see him fall this far, but he is somebody who is a very versatile skill set in a running back group that I think could absolutely use his
Mhm.
type of skill set.
Yep.
Maybe he won't be getting more than 1 to 2 touches a game early on, but I do think that he's someone who, in my humble opinion, could actually be able to make the 53 and get a touch or two a game, which is nice for a 7th round pick.
Oh, he's making a team.
Oh,
There's no doubt about that. This to me is right there with Trey Amos is one of the biggest steals, not just of our draft, but just the draft in general.
right.
I did not anticipate. I thought his East West Shrine Bowl, um, MVP was going to
Mhm.
open some eyes,
Right.
um, and get him some notoriety. He didn't get the invite to the combine, and we know that was because he didn't play but one game. And so I just felt like he had done enough in the postseason
Mhm.
pre-draft lead up to get himself into the 5th, 6th round. Maybe 4th. I saw some backs come off the board where I'm like, really, him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like some guys that were solid. Like, I'm looking at Jarquez Hunter in the 4th round. Wait, what are we
Mhm.
doing right now? So
Yep.
you see some of these guys come off the board, and you're like, huh, interesting, right? And running back's one of those, beauties in the eye of the beholder type of situations, right? So I love JCM, aka Bill. So his nickname is Bill,
Bill.
because Little Bill is a character that was a cartoon character in the
Mm.
90s,
Yep.
early 2000s that bald head, peasy head, and he had a like a low cut, and his head was shaped like Little Bill, so they would tease him and say he looked like Little Bill, and it just stuck. His nickname is Bill.
Mm.
So when you talk about Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, Bill, this is a guy that offers us something that we don't currently have. We have
Mm.
no speed in our backfield right now. This is a guy that ran like a 4.45 40
Mm.
at his pro day, and he's got a tremendous agility. Um, I
Yeah.
thought one of my biggest traits and attributes I look for in a running back is contact balance.
Mhm.
If you want to be elite in this league, you have to have contact balance. You're going to get bumped. Guys are going to try to give you shoulders. They're going to hit you on the thigh pad. They're going to give you a shoulder to your shoulder. And you got to be able to withstand that contact, stay on your feet, and continue to get positive yards.
Mm.
The best backs in this league have impeccable contact balance. He has that in spades. I thought after obviously Genty, I thought that Devin Neal and Cam Scatterbo had
Mm.
tremendous contact balance. Those three
Right.
backs were the only 3 backs I had ahead of him in contact balance in this draft. Thought he was phenomenal in that regard. Has this phone booth like agility to make guys miss in tight spaces.
Mm.
Really good acceleration. The one knock on him was he doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield. Wasn't asked to do that throughout his career in his various stops. People would bring up he's 24 years old. There's not a lot of tread off those tires though. So it's not like the
Right.
24-year-old who's been getting, 20, 250, 300 carries a year. He's not that guy.
Right.
So I feel good about this kid. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if we get to week 9 or 10 in this season and he's getting the bulk of the carries in Washington.
Ooh.
He's that good. And I think this is the last year for Brian Robinson Jr. in Washington. We'll see. I'm a big Brian Robinson Jr. fan. I think he just needed someone to complement him from a speed standpoint. But he's
Yeah.
dealt with injuries each of the last 2 seasons that have kind of hampered him as we got down the stretch. So it wouldn't shock me if he has one of these nagging injuries pop up. Ja'Cory Crosky gets in there, Merritt gets in there, and is able to show what he can do. This preseason will be big for him because
Yeah.
if he goes out there and he kills it in the preseason, you were talking about 1 or 2 touches a game early on. It could be a little bit more like 5 to 7 touches if he can go out and show that, hey, I belong here and I should be in the mix. They're going to start him off slow. So your 1 to 2 is probably more accurate than 5 to 7. But if he shows like home run threat ability, if he shows the ability to take a 2-yard carry and get 5, a 5-yard carry and get 10, and do those things that we saw him do at New Mexico and what he was able to do in Arizona in the one game, I wouldn't be shocked if he got in there a lot sooner rather than later and had some sticking power.
There's a couple backs in the 7th that I thought were extremely undervalued. I know, like, you're a fan of contact balance. I'm sure that you like that about Kyle Monangai as well.
Mhm.
And then you also talk about LaQuint Allen, who
Oh my
went to
God.
Jacksonville. I mean,
I
like,
love LaQuint Allen.
so good,
Yeah,
so good.
I love
And
LaQuint
it's
Allen.
like these backs ended up just slipping, and
Mhm.
it this could be one of the best 7th rounds in terms of running back value that I've studied
Mhm.
because of the fact that whether it's Bill, whether it is Monangai, whether it is LaQuint Allen, and I'm sure there might be another name that I forgot about in the 7th, but like you could legitimately see 3 higher end committee backs
Mhm.
out the gate.
Yeah.
And it's like one preseason could end up showing you. It's like,
Yep.
whoa, hello.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, excellent job by the Commanders in the draft. That's why I ended up giving him an A. Thinking about it with Jalen Lane's special team potential, you can't give something an A plus if it's 5 picks,
Right.
but
Right.
it's pretty damn close. It's a
Right.
really like again, I didn't even think about the utility as just a pure returner
Mhm.
because of the lack of it. But
Yeah.
let's talk about a couple of UDFAs. Like the ones I mentioned before to you was Ja'Cory Brooks and Fentrell Cypress.
Mhm.
Cypress, from UVA, went to
Mhm.
Florida State.
Mhm.
Really good background there. Probably going to be a practice squad body. I don't
Mhm.
think he did necessarily too well this past year to
Mhm.
gain any sort of momentum towards a 53.
Right.
I got to see him in person at SMU. Did not really wow me there either.
Mhm.
But Ja'Cory Brooks, I know he has drop issues,
Mhm.
but he didn't test out well either, which is
Right.
surprising.
Right.
I thought even for the lack of testing, he could still vertically push some pretty damn solid corners.
Mhm.
And I was surprised to see him go undrafted. But I mean, he's a former 5-star.
Mhm.
Like he was an absolute beast at Alabama before that final year where he just took a massive dip. It was a
Mhm.
big head scratcher. But he goes to Louisville and does a pretty damn good job and then ends up falling out. I honestly don't think that it's out of the cards.
Mhm.
Not saying it's probable. I don't think it's out of the cards for him to actually make a push for the 53. What are your
Absolutely.
thoughts?
Absolutely. I think there are 2 guys of the UDFAs that have a legitimate shot of making the roster, or at least pushing to make the roster. Robert McDaniel, a safety out of Jackson State, and your boy
Ja'Cory.
Ja'Cory
Yeah. Brooks.
Brooks.
I got you.
I just Brooks, as you mentioned, has the drop issue. And he just didn't test well. People get scared when a receiver's your second number is a 6.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of explosion there anywhere, right? Like he doesn't have an explosive jump, and when you watch him, he's a build-up speed guy,
Right.
right? So he needs a runway. Contested catches are his thing, but he has to make contested catches because he can't separate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another problem that people have with him. Uh, I like him. I
Yeah.
don't love him, but our receiver room isn't the best, the back end of it especially.
Right.
So there's an opportunity there if he can come in, make some tough catches, because we don't have there's a big body void. We have Noah Brown. That is the only big body receiver that we actually have.
Right.
Now, I feel like he's probably on this roster. They really like him. They like the things that he brings to the roster. He was really good for us last year. I don't see them bailing on him. He signed a 1-year deal. I don't see them bailing on him. But to add another guy with a similar frame would be very interesting. And
Mm.
that's something to keep an eye out on. But it feels like he's on the outside looking in when it's all said and done. But a guy that
Yeah.
they would love to have on the practice squad and continue to develop. And maybe next year he'll be, on the 53-man roster.
Yeah.
Um, Now, Robert McDaniel, the safety out of Jackson State, totally different conversation. He is a guy that is extremely versatile. They moved on from um, Jeremy Chin,
Mm.
who was like a 6'2", 200 and 15, 20-pound safety.
Right.
That's the kind of safety they like. And they went out and worked out McDaniel before the draft, and they really liked him. And I knew that if he didn't get drafted, they were going to make a push to sign him, and that's what they did.
Mm.
And I know they like his skill set. He's very versatile. He can split out wide if need be. If a tight end walks out there, he can go with them. He can play in the slot. He can blitz. He's aggressive down around the box, just how they like those bigger safeties. Um, he's got a realistic shot of making this roster. And I do
Mm.
not think the safety position is completely sewn up.
Right.
And they moved on from quite a few safeties last year that were here last year. So I do think there's an opening for someone to make. And as far as Fintrell Cypress the third is concerned, I liked him because we brought in like two or three different corners, and I liked him the most of all of those
Mm.
guys. And I really said, his game is steady. The problem with Fintrell Cypress, and I always struggle with this, is there's no ball production.
Mm.
He does not attack the football. Does a really good job of staying in phase. I like his aggressiveness at the catch point. I
Mm.
think he's aggressive with receivers at the line of scrimmage. There clearly is no gear, right? Like he has to be technically sound, because
Right.
it's funny if you look at his raw score, he's got really good short area quickness, which you see on tape.
Mm.
He has long distance speed. I think he ran a 4.43, so he's got long distance speed, but he's a build-up guy. But
Mm.
the transitions are a bit clunky, and then you see in that second range,
Yep.
right? He struggles, and that's where he can be had. And
Mm.
so he doesn't turn and locate the football, the way you would like him to. I think he had one career interception in like 50 some odd games. I mean, that's scary for me
Yeah.
because in college, all you have to do is be in the right place at the right time. A deflection, anything, you're going to end up with 3 or 4 interceptions if you play that many games. And for him to only
Especially.
have one
Mm.
is very eye-popping, and
Mhm.
it's something that I think was a problem for a lot of evaluators.
Mhm.
He's a good football player, but there are no traits that stand out about him that are exceptional.
Yep.
But to your point, I think he's a guy you put on the practice squad. You continue to develop, and I could see him being in the mix, for a roster spot potentially next year, right? So
Yeah.
he's a
I
very
mean,
intriguing guy.
oh, absolutely. And Fentrell has that much experience as well, 50 games. So you already know, especially in terms of practice squad bodies, when your teams are going up against these players, you do want them to at least go up against, players that are not scrubs.
Yeah.
And it's like some of the times, yeah, you get some players that are going to be a little more athletic freaky, but they're not going to have that skill set that allows your players in practice to get experience versus actual players who have a little bit more of an understanding of the game. So it's good to have those players that maybe have the lower ceiling,
Mhm.
but I mean, technically, Fentrell tested better than I thought he showed in
Yeah.
person too.
Yeah.
Like he didn't look like a 4.43 guy,
Yeah.
but very glad to see he has it in him.
Yeah.
Maybe that shows how good his work ethic is in the offseason. Some
Yeah.
guys just really work their ass off to get in the best shape possible. Maybe Florida State was like, we want you for this specific role. I mean, you saw Zaire Thomas not test very well either.
Right.
So
Right.
maybe that is the reason. Maybe that's something that they were kind of taught to do at Florida State. Fingers crossed that ends up working out. But I mean, not a bad body to have on the practice squad, because if it works out, it's not a super duper low chance. Like there's
Mhm.
a legitimate future there.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on. It was a
No doubt.
blast talking. Great insight as always. Again, give yourself one more plug and then we'll let the people go.
Yep. So you can find me on YouTube, Louie Tee Network. You can find me really across any platform. You type in Louie Tee Network, and you'll find me on Twitter at Louie Tee Network, on IG, Louie Tee Network _. I have a podcast, Louie Tee Network podcast, that can be found on the YouTube channel as well. So again, anything you type in, I got the Commanders Kings that I'm a part of. So it's 4 Commanders content creators talking about the Commanders. We do a weekly show there. I'm a part of the NFC East Super Friends. So that's a big conglomerate there. One creator from each of the 4 NFC
Mhm.
East teams. A lot of trash talking goes on there, as you could imagine. Lots of fun. So I'm all over the place. Check me out. Check us out. We really appreciate all the support, man. And once again, thank you for having me on your channel, man. Really had a
Absolutely. And
blast.
No, dude, it was great. It was great. Well, thank all y'all for watching.